Hello, everybody. Welcome to the New York Pizza Festival. This is our New York Slice moment where we're going to be talking to three amazing people from New York Slice shops. And it's all going to be about the New York Slice. Now, New York style pizza is sort of this weird phrase that gets thrown around all the time. And I think it's a confusing phrase. What we're talking about right here is specifically the New York Slice. And just to give you some quick background before we meet the panelists, I'll give you some information about kind of what happened historically as a real baseline part here. In the late 1800s, we get a lot of immigration from Southern Italy. Those immigrants who come over bring things like their culture, pizza being one of those pieces. And the pizza that's originally brought over is being baked in old brick ovens, like coal-fired ovens in places like New York, Boston, Trenton, New Haven, industrial cities in the Northeast. Then, after a few decades, natural gas gets cheaper. People start manufacturing ovens that bake at a lower temperature, but are easier to deal with, easier to use. You don't have to deal with coal or wood. Those are the gas-fired ovens that start being sold in the late 1930s. And that's what begins the era of the lower temperature bake, longer bake, larger pie, cut up into slices, sold on the street, the New York Slice, the classic New York Slice. So we're going to be talking about that version of New York style pizza, like really the version that made New York famous for pizza. My name's Scott Weiner. I run Scott's Pizza Tours here in New York City, and I'm joined by Scarr from Scarr's Pizza, Josephine from Lenny's, and Mark from Lucali. So it's great to have all three of you. I want to let you guys give yourself a quick little intro, and I want to ask you to just let us know, first of all, how you got into the pizza business, but also what was the importance of pizza, at least New York slices, to you as a kid? And let's start with Scarr for this.
Me growing up, it's always been a part of my life as long as I remember. Pizza by the slice. From everyone from my grandmother taking me to the slice shops, my cousins, the guys on the street. Like, it's always played a huge pivotal role in my life, basically. Like, I ate it basically almost every day.
Was it like a lunch break from school thing, an after school thing? What was it?
I mean, it was like, for us, it was so the spot I used to go to a lot when I was growing up was in Harlem, like 138th and Broadway. It was called Theo's. And then they moved it across the street and called it Olga's. And before that, I used to always go to Silent Carmine too, because we used to go to the park as a little kid to Riverside, because that was the closest park to us. So those were the two slice spots that I grew up eating. And for us, it was either baseball, Little League baseball. We always got pizza after the games, after school, cutting school. I mean, it was like always the pivotal part. We always hung out in there, like, got ices, Applebee's, whatever we could afford. The easiest thing to get, always the easiest thing. Like, it always played a huge role in our lives growing up here in the city. And I'm sure everyone here, everyone here grew up here too, so they could attest to the same thing. So they could basically say the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably about the same, but I'm curious to hear, Josephine, what was that New York slice for you as a kid?
It's really funny because my father would bring a cold slice home, and then my mom would bag up that cold slice, and my teachers would actually heat up my pizza for me. I mean, I guess it was like the cheaper route for my parents too, because they were both born in Italy and they came here as immigrants. And my teacher would heat it up into the oven, and I'd have a slice of pizza while everybody else was eating lunch food. So that was a New York slice for me. But one of the questions would be like, what's the iconic like representation of a slice of pizza? In my mind, it's exactly what John Travolta did. From what I understand, a few old timers told me that this is the first slice shop in the area. That's why we have the pull-up window that opens up and John Travolta walks to and grabs a slice. It's the typical day in the neighborhood in New York City. You're going to pick something up while you're running on an errand. He had a pink in his hand, he's checking out a girl, doing his thing on 86th Street, and he grabs two slices because he's too busy to eat them right next to each other, it's time consuming. He put them on top of each other and he had a double decker. Perfect, period, the end. It just worked out.
Wait, Josephine, you're burying the lead here. Can you just spell it out for people? Why are you talking about John Travolta and Lenny's Pizza? What's the connection?
Oh, okay. So there was a movie. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
I hope
called
people have
Saturday
heard
Night
of it. I
Fever.
hope.
to film, disco film. It was filmed mainly in Bay Ridge and Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and it was filmed at our shop, Lenny's Pizza.
Probably the most iconic pizza scene in all cinematic history is that scene in Saturday Night Fever,
Yeah.
right? Mark, yeah, so you Lucali, which is not a slice shop, right? But you grew up with slices. Tell us about your neighborhood slice growing up.
Well, it all started with me, like my grandmother and my mother, you know, Fridays was their night off. Also, Friday in the Italian community is a big pizza night because most Italians didn't eat meat on Friday. So pizza became, you know, Friday night dinner for a lot of people. For me, I just remember like me and my brothers, we would all get excited. You know, it's Friday, it's pizza night. I think what a lot of people don't talk about too is it's not just a memory. It's amazing. It's an amazing food that tastes great. You know, no one mentions that. A lot of people like, you know, it was a cheap way out. You know, it was a cheap meal. It was a fast meal. It was also an amazing meal. And I remember like just waiting, you know, for my dad to come home with that pie and place it on the table. And me and my brothers are like hunched over the box, waiting for him to open it and like getting ready to dig in. And then it was like, you know, from there, it went to me being allowed to cross the street. It started with being allowed to cross the street. And, you know, I was able to walk to Angelo's Pizzeria, which is on the corner of Lucali, where Lucali, it used to be there. And, you know, and next door to Lucali was an old coal oven bakery, La Barbera's, and there would be pizza there in the morning. They would sell a square pie, and you would go in there, and we would go in there in the morning before we'd go to school, and that was our breakfast. You know, we buy a slice for $0.25, you know, and eat it on the way to school, and that's how it all started for me.
Obviously, you all have these like emotional connections to pizza by the slice, and as Mark just mentioned, of course, it tastes good. I feel like nobody talks about that because it's understood.
Yeah,
you know, like we really need to say like people like it because it's good. But I'm curious how the three of you got into the business for it. I know, like, with some of you, it's family. Some of you, it's you got into it because of working, and then with one of you, it kind of you stumbled into it. So I'm curious to hear, like, Josephine, your family's had this place since you were born, right? You've had Lenny's since the late 80s.
My dad's been in the pizza business for a long time. He had a pizzeria in Bay Ridge when he actually had this pizzeria as well. And he had pizzerias in New Jersey, just like different areas, you know, starting up in the business years ago, and especially as an immigrant, it's a little different. You didn't necessarily have like investors or whatnot. His initial place that he started to like work at was just to make money. And then eventually it wound up becoming like his career. But in the beginning, he was working in the worst neighborhoods. He was working in a pizzeria that actually had security guards on the weekends because that's how bad the area was, which was Times Square back in the day.
So, Joe, when we know your dad got into pizza as the business, but what made you stick with it? Because now you are that. Like, when I think of Lenny's, I think about you. What made you want to stick around and be part of the pizzeria?
I mean, I love my customers. I'm definitely a people person. I've made a gazillion friends. I've gone to parties. I've gone to funerals, unfortunately. Since the place has been here for so long, people have watched me growing up here. I've watched kids grow up here. So it's definitely a beautiful experience. I've gotten to know so many great people, and that's a huge part of it. But the bigger part is really my parents. I did this all for my family.
And Scarr, what about you? I know you've worked in a lot of pizzerias before you opened Scarr's. What was your path like to where you are right now?
It's really hard. It was really difficult, but you know, with a lot of luck, we made it to where we were at. A lot of friends believing in our business and stuff like that really helped us out as well. Because I think you've known us since the first day we started, probably, right?
I remember Yanni, who's now your manager, telling me about that you were going to open. And he said, "Oh yeah, buddy of mine from back in the day is going to open up this slice shop." And I like freaked out, and I went over and I looked at it before you were, you know, when you were still under construction. And yeah, I remember going in maybe that first week, and it's real cool to see it. But what excites me more about it is that you worked in so many other places before you
I
even
worked.
Scarr's. I don't think people know all that.
No, so the first pizzeria I worked at was Lombardi's. And it was literally maybe a year after Bellucci got arrested. So I didn't really meet Andrew at that time when he was the pizza guy there. And the guys, so when I started working there, so Yanni's mother used to be the GM, Rosemary, at Lombardi's. And she gave me a job because I didn't have anything at the time. So I didn't have any opportunities. She knew me since I was a kid. So she knew how I was as a kid. She was like, if I don't give this kid a job, he's gonna get into a lot of trouble. So she gave me an opportunity to work there, and I started working there as a just picking up the phones for a week. And then after that, it just made me a server, and I just started working from there. And then I learned how to, I saw how they were making pizza and stuff. And when I had the pizza the first time at Lombardi's, I was like, this is different, a lot different than the New York slice, I'll tell you that, but it was really good. So I just fell in love with pizza from that point on. And, I worked there. I learned a little bit how to make pizza there. Then I started working, I think at Lasso right after that, if I'm not mistaken. That was down the block. And then I stayed there for about a year or so, learned about wood-fired pizzas and stuff. And then after that, I went to Artichoke and started working with Sal and Fran. And that's where I really learned a lot about pizza making through them. And then also more through Fran than Sal. And they also had a pizza guy that worked there as well that was like really experienced. So I learned a lot with him about how to work the ovens, how to cook it, find out where the hot spot is in the oven, spinning pies and all that stuff. He taught me a lot. And then after that, I went to Joe's after that. And I think they only still had Carmine at this time too. So then I learned a lot from the guys that worked there, like Ruben and Alex and stuff. So I learned a lot from them. And then that was it. I felt like I was ready to open up my own spot. Then I did a little pit stop at Gigi's and taught them how to do pizza there. It looked like a little B recipe of some sort. And then after that, I just opened up my own spot.
That's awesome. Mark, I feel like your story is kind of opposite. Scarr's got all these places where he worked, like literally on the same block over there. Mark, you never left the block where you grew up, but you weren't working at the pizza shops. Where were you making pizza before Lucali?
I was in the construction business. My cousin, one of my cousins purchased a pizzeria in East New York. And, I would go there and visit him and just hang out with him. And one day, I asked him, I was like, hey, can I make a pizza? And he was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And I made a pizza. I mean, that was the only pizza experience I ever had. For me, it was, I signed a lease on a location, not knowing what I was going to put here. I didn't know if it was going to be a cafe, an ice cream shop. And then it's just like, about 5 months into me doing the renovation, I decided it would be pizza.
So you're renovating the place, not knowing what you're turning it into.
Yep.
You just turned it into a box.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I guess, my, a lot of things people don't know about me. I love, since I was a little kid, I loved, I was fascinated with construction and design. And I just wanted to build a beautiful room, something out of the 1920s, 30s. And that's how the process started. Me just building something, and it was me building something for myself. I always used to build and design for other people. And, now here I am doing it. That's basically, believe it or not, how it started.
So this is not a slice shop. We should explain to people that Lucali is not a slice shop. It's a pie place. Do you have any plans of ever opening up a slice shop maybe?
Yes, I'm in the process. I was supposed to open up this was originally supposed to be a slice shop, but then when I saw the construction, I was like, that's not going to work here. It's not going to fit. A gas oven, you've been here. It looked kind of really awkward. About a year and a half ago, I was just waiting for the right location. And another one popped up, and I signed a lease about a year and a half ago. And I've been working on that location for about a year and a half, hopefully to open up soon.
Wow. So there is a,
And I am doing a New York, yes, and it is going to be a traditional New York slice. And I may have to get Scarr and Josephine in there to give me a few pointers.
well, that brings me to my next question here. Speaking of pointers for New York slices, what do the three of you look for in like the perfect New York slice? Texture, flavor, everything. What are you looking for?
Me, it's when I fold that slice, I like the crack. I like when that little diamond forms in the tip. Not too much oil floating on top. And I look for ratio between crust sauce and cheese. There's a specific ratio that I prefer. And that's it.
I'd agree. I feel like it's mainly the consistency and the ratio. If sometimes you go to places, it has that crisp and it stays up. But I think a lot of it has to do with that. Some people like it's a preference, because some people like their pizza when it just comes out of the oven. They don't mind burning the top of the roof of their mouth. But I don't know. I don't really like it that way.
If I can interrupt, like she mentioned, I remember eating Scar's pizza for the first time, and it was nice hot out of the oven, and here I am, I'm chewing it, I'm like, it's piping hot, I'm burning the roof of my mouth, and I'm like trying to suck the cheese, everything that's dripping off before it lands on the sidewalk. That's a New York slice.
For me, it's like, I agree with what Mark was saying. It's like the chewiness, the like doughiness, like the crisp. It's like it's really hard to just make it all come together. And to do it, the hardest part for me owning a shop now for 5 years is the consistency as well.
Yep.
It's like I had an issue with the guys doing too much cheese on the slices, right? And it's not because I'm trying to be cheap. It's just it made the pizza, like you were saying, it made the pizza floppy. It made the pizza, not enjoyable. Like, especially when you get too much cheese on a slice, if you let it sit and you reheat it, it's not the same. It has this real.
It's not the same.
No, it's not. It's not the same at all. I hate being on top of people and just me watching them. Like, I'm sure all of us could see, we see our pizzas, we're like, all right, something's off. Just by walking in, you'll see it out. You're like, all right, you guys are doing too much sauce here. You guys are doing too much cheese here. There's always something wrong with it. The real trick in a great New York slice for me is just having, like what Mark was saying, all three ingredients come together perfectly. That's to me, that's the key to a great slice, in my opinion.
It's funny, like you mentioned consistency, and with my oven, a brick oven, every night before opening, it's like I'm making the sign of the cross, because you never know what you're going to get out of these ovens. And it's not really the oven. I had this conversation with one of my guys that's going to start working with me. When you're making a pizzeria, when you're making pizza in a pizzeria that isn't busy, it's on and off, and you're making pizza in a pizzeria where you're constantly going nonstop, you're coming out with two totally different products. You got dough sitting on the counter maybe 20 minutes longer. There are all these things you need to factor in. And, the New York slice became something, I want to say in the 90s, early 2000s, it kind of fell off a little. And
it fell off a lot.
It fell off a lot, yes. Yeah. And people really no longer cared. Just for this, it was a moneymaker. And I think that, I forget what year it came out. There was that article in the Village Voice with Dom DeFara. And that's what put Dom on the scene. Really, it really blew him up. And here you have this guy who, again, like I said, back in the 50s, 60s, 80s, Scott, like you had mentioned, you had that culture come over from Italy. And these were guys that were, these guys were at that oven cooking till they were old men, taking care of their families, and they took a lot of pride in what they did, and that got lost. And then Dom came back on the scene, and he started pumping out these amazing slices, and I think it just started this whole revolution where now you have Scarr, me, That's Pizza, all these guys out there, starting to take pride in what they do again.
So, when you say that pizza and the New York slice really fell off in the 90s. And of course, some of that still sticks around. What do you think what's the biggest gaffe when you walk into those shops at that time or even now? What's the biggest mistake you think that these pizzerias are making that turns their pizza with the same ingredients that you might be using into something that's like no dice?
Now you have the invention of buffalo wing pizza and all these crazy pizzas because you know what? The pizza isn't selling. We need to be a little bit more creative. You know, Josephine, you're a little younger, a lot younger than me. But, you know, growing up in these slice joints, people never ordered toppings. It was very rare.
No, they didn't.
No, we didn't really sell toppings. We didn't sell
No.
toppings for a while. Now we have like a whole bunch of different slices, but when I was a kid, we only had a couple of rolls. We had a fried calzone. We used to fry calzones in front of the shop.
Yeah.
And then we had a square and a regular. Slice was $1. So I'm not that young, but you also have to remember, it's time as time passes, people want variety. You go to Starbucks, you get 10,000 different types of coffee. Me and you might say, well, I just want milk in my coffee. Maybe you get a drop of sugar, but it's a totally different world now. So if you don't go and continue on with the way things are, you're going to fall back and these people will look at you crazy. Don't forget, my father still writes his inventory on a paper bag. You can't say that about most people who did. Most people don't even do their own inventory. They give it to somebody else to delegate. It's a different world now. It's a completely different world, and you can't fall short. Because if you fall short and not take credit cards, let's say, you're going to lose business and eventually you're going to go out. I think that's a big difference between now and years ago. Everything just became more complicated.
Well, I also think, like, again, as far as toppings, and I could be wrong, it's kind of like this crazy theory I have. Outside of New York, you really couldn't get good pizza anywhere. You know, and I'm going, I mean, you really couldn't get good pizza anywhere. And I think all these other states, they weren't making good pizza. So it's toppings, you know, they're throwing all these toppings and being super creative, which don't get me wrong, I do appreciate toppings every now and then in some of these crazy pizzas. But I think, you know, New York is, you know, I think that pizza culture, most of it, as far as the customer, is gone. Right? The old school customer is gone. They were just used to good pizza. And then you have, like, you know, it went south. And I try to educate my customers because, like, they're coming from a culture where the pizza needed topping because the pizza wasn't good. And, you know, they're always asking me, well, you know, they sit down, what do you recommend? It's their first time here. And I train my waitresses, you know, if people ask, what's your signature pie? The plain pie. I want you to experience pizza in its purest form. No topping.
I agree. I didn't.
And because they've never had good pizza.
My biggest seller at the shop is cheese. This cheese.
Yeah, I mean, I go to your place. You know,
Same here.
And I try to get rid of the smoke and mirrors.
But this is like where you're talking about the consumer and what they want. Josephine mentioned that, like, you know, you make this buffalo chicken slice because people are asking for it, and you're there.
Pineapple.
Yeah, you got.
I'm not eating pineapple on pizza.
No, but because it's a different. New York has become. It was always a melting pot. It's become a different melting pot.
Gentrified more now.
Yeah, gentrified, whatever you want. And it's a more transient place. You know, people were born and raised and died in New York. It's no longer like that. Well, at least not my neighborhood. Wait, guys, hold on a second. I gotta give these guys. I gotta come on. Guys, that's gonna go in the back, all the way in the back.
I think he thinks he muted himself.
No, I was, but then I was like, no, I'm not.
All right. Well, this is awesome.
We're running a pizzeria, Scott. We're not sitting in our living rooms like you.
I'm close. I'm close
Oh,
to
you
lunch.
are.
I want to sit.
What are you talking about? I don't
own.
own a pizzeria. If I did, I would be sitting there. You want me to come and sit there with you? I'll come sit there with you. Listen, thanks to everybody for joining us, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the festival.
Take care. Thanks for
having us.